Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk Physical Media. My name is John. It's just going to be me hosting again this week. Unfortunately, Faith came down with something and she woke up this morning. She was going to be on the show, but she's not really feeling too well right now. So it's just going to be the big dog again for one more week. I promise you guys she'll be back next week. But it's alright because we have a busy news week for you guys. And we also have a lot of questions that we're going to get to right now. But we like to start the show off every single week with the news. And Arrow Video made their June 2024 announcements. And the big one coming out of that was American Gigolo, the 1980 film written and directed by Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader makes these very dark character studies, mostly studying men in very dark places, and American Gigolo is no different. This one also stars Richard Gere, and we're continuing in the season of Richard Gere because we just got Primal Fear on 4K Blu-ray. In December, we got Days of Heaven from the Criterion Collection on 4K Blu-ray. But American Gigolo is one of his most famous films, so all that we need left from Richard Gere is really An Officer and a Gentleman, and in my opinion, Eternal Affairs. Once those two come to 4K Blu-ray, I think we've gotten all the big ones when it comes to Richard Gere. But we also are going to be getting an Arrow Video Store exclusive version of this if you want to get the alternate artwork, which I think is really nice. But whatever way you want to go, this is going to be a great release from Arrow Video. I'm really excited about it. I love American Gigolo. I also really love Paul Schrader films. You know, they really speak to me, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but this guy's made Blue Collars, Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters. Hardcore is one of the darkest films ever, and it's one of George C. Scott's best performances. And this is also the guy who wrote Taxi Driver and Rolling Thunder, which is getting a 4K Blu-ray release in April from Shout Select, which I'm really looking forward to as well. That's a big favorite of Quentin Tarantino, Rolling Thunder, and I can't wait to check that one out on 4K Blu-ray. That's a very gritty movie, so I'm very curious to see how that one actually transfers to 4K Blu-ray. But American Gigolo wasn't the only thing that Arrow Video announced. They also announced Mute Witness will be coming to 4K Blu-ray. Madman is going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray. Night Strain is going to be getting a Blu-ray release, and Whitnail and I is going to get a 4K Blu-ray release. And I was actually pretty interested in Whitnail and I because it seemed like a lot of people were excited about that one. When you go on the Blu-ray.com post about Arrow Video's June releases, a lot of people are very excited about that one. I've never seen the movie before, but apparently it's got a pretty big cult following, and the way people are excited about that, it really makes me interested in checking it out for myself. Have you guys actually seen that film? Let me know in the comment section below if it's worth me checking out or not, or if it's just being overhyped by certain fans of that movie, but I'm very curious about it. It seems pretty interesting, so let me know in the comment section about that one. And that's all that was announced from Arrow Video. Obviously, American Gigolo was the big standout for June, and another thing that got announced for June 11, 2024 from Sony in a beautiful 4K steelbook is Femme Nikita. This is the 1990 French film directed by Luc Besson. It's also written by Luc Besson, and this is the film he did before 1994's Leon the Professional, which is my favorite film from him. But Femme Nikita, not that far behind. I absolutely love this action film. You can also see Jean Reno in this film before Leon the Professional, and I feel like Leon the Professional's cousin is Femme Nikita. Both of these movies have very similar tones, very similar set designs, and I just love it for it. And I think this movie is going to look great in 4K Blu-ray. And a lot of people might remember the name Femme Nikita because back in the 1990s, there was actually a TV show called Femme Nikita based on this movie. And I just remember them promoting this so much on WWF Raw. And I'm rewatching Raw from 1997, and they always put up in the corner, "Oh, this Thursday, you can watch the latest episode of Femme Nikita." And I'm just like, man, that show was alright, but the movie itself is an all-time classic, and I can't believe this is going to be coming to us from Sony, so I imagine this is going to be a great transfer. And then the last bit of news we got this week is that Karate Kid is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and they are going to be re-releasing this with brand new VHS-type packaging, which is awesome. And because I don't own this on 4K Blu-ray yet, I'll probably end up grabbing that, even though The Karate Kid is not one of my personal favorite 1980s films, but I know a lot of people, including Lorenzo Harris, Man of God, consider this to be one of their favorite films ever, and you know, I think I definitely owe it a rewatch. This is Ralph Macchio's most famous movie role, and I've actually met Ralph Macchio a few times. I've cut his cold cuts back when I used to be a deli clerk at a local supermarket. Ralph Macchio actually lives in the same town as me in a much nicer house, but he's a really nice guy, a really down-to-earth celebrity, and it's really nice to see him, you know, really get a resurgence to his career with Cobra Kai on Netflix. But you know what, he'll always be known for 1984's The Karate Kid. That will always be his most memorable role, so I'll probably end up grabbing that on 4K Blu-ray as well. But that was it as far as announcements go show for Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray this week, so I guess it really wasn't that much at the end of the day. But there was also another subject that I was talking to somebody in the comments section about this past week. Somebody will actually see me answer a couple of their questions later in the show, but I thought it was very important to talk about because we were talking about how to bring in new fans of physical media. At the end of the day, 4K Blu-rays still sell the least, even less than Blu-rays, and DVDs still lead the way. You talk to the regular consumer, they don't really know too much about Blu-ray, and then forget it when it comes to 4K Blu-ray, and you explain to them about upgrading their sound system and upgrading their television. You know, that's a pretty big deal, and most people still don't really care about collecting physical media. You know, the regular average Joe, they don't really mind streaming, but we, of course, physical media collectors, always want to bring in new fans of physical media, and I've always said, before we can get them fans of physical media, we have to make sure that they're fans of films in general. We need more cinephiles. And if you saw that interview this past week with Millie Bobby Brown, you know, a movie star, she said she doesn't really watch too many movies. And unfortunately, the younger generation coming up, now this isn't everybody, you know, they call it the TikTok generation for a reason. You know, they don't have long attention spans, so they're not going to really sit in there and settle in for a 2 to 3 hour movie every single day. Like, you know, maybe we're the weird ones, I don't know. But before we can get new physical media fans, we need more cinephiles out there. And then we have to make them aware of, like, hey, you know, you want to see the highest quality of film? You got to watch it on physical media. And that includes Blu-ray. And the thing about Blu-rays is, for a long time, DVDs, Blu-rays, until we got to 4K Blu-ray, those Blu-rays are region locked. You can only watch them in certain regions. You know, I live in region A. A lot of people who live in the UK, Ireland, that's region B. And then I think people in Australia would be considered region C. And unless you have a region-free player, you are only able to watch those Blu-ray or DVD releases in that specific region. So when we got to 4K Blu-ray, even though the 4K Blu-ray might still be released in certain regions, like we just talked about Arrow Video, certain things only come out in the UK, certain things only come out in the United States and Canada. But if you live in a different region, you can still get those imported from websites like the Atomic Movie Store and Diabolic DVD, and they really don't have high import fees. They waive a lot of those fees, so it doesn't cost you that much extra to get it imported. Like the Psycho 4K Blu-ray box set from Arrow Video, one of my favorite box sets ever. If you lived in the United States, you had to get that imported, but a lot of people don't realize that you can actually do that, mainly because back in the day, Blu-rays, and it's still to this very day, if you still buy Blu-rays, you know, that 4K Blu-ray box set, the pack and Blu-rays are region locked, and that happens a lot. But my Frighteners 4K Blu-ray from Turbine, the Blu-rays that are packed in there aren't region locked. So it really does come down to the studio itself, but the reason why this happens is certain studios have the rights to certain films in certain areas. We just saw the Child's Play 4K Blu-rays. If you bought them in the United States, they came from Screen Factory. They were individually released. They weren't released in box sets, while Arrow Video released a beautiful looking box set, except the first Child's Play was only on Blu-ray and region locked Blu-ray, while the rest were on 4K Blu-ray. So of course that created a little bit of an issue. If you wanted to have that imported, you still had to buy the original Child's Play from Screen Factory on 4K Blu-ray. You know, it's all a money thing. These studios are businesses, and of course they're greedy, so they're not going to come to agreements. Look how long it took for us to get that Screen Factory Friday the 13th Blu-ray box set. It took forever because we couldn't get the studios who made these Friday the 13ths to come together and come to an agreement to release them all on physical media for the fans out there. You know, it's all about money for them. They would rather have nothing than let anyone else have something, and that's honestly what it really comes down to. Luckily for us, we don't suffer from these region locks anymore when it comes to 4K Blu-ray. Yes, there are some minor exceptions where some 4K Blu-rays get region locked, but it's really the minority when that happens. It's really not that often, whereas Blu-rays for the most part were region locked and still are to this very day. And for us to get more physical media fans, it's very frustrating to have certain films released in certain regions, because not everyone's going to want to get a region-free Blu-ray player. Hell, I don't even have a region-free Blu-ray player yet, or a region-free 4K Blu-ray player at that, which is what I eventually want to end up with, because, you know, it's a little bit pricey. And I don't really watch too many region-locked Blu-rays anyway. You know, for the most part, like I said, 4K Blu-rays, they aren't region-locked. Peeping Tom is getting a Criterion 4K Blu-ray release, I believe, in May. I already have it from Studio Canal. Luckily for me, all the extras were put on the 4K Blu-ray, so I had the film and all the extras on the 4K Blu-ray. I just wasn't able to compare it to the pack and Blu-ray. I would have to buy the Criterion release or buy a region-free player. Obviously, this could turn away a lot of new physical media buyers, especially if you're explaining it to them. They're going to be like, all right, you know what? Sounds like too much. But if you really are a fan of quality films and seeing them in the best quality possible, you obviously want to have the best, and Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray are definitely the best. Even Blu-rays. Like, we sell Blu-ray short sometimes, but Blu-rays are still absolutely fantastic. So I'm definitely glad that we've shifted away from that. I just really hope that we stop locking Blu-rays. I mean, we can make them region-free. All you got to do is just not region-lock them, and we'll be all right, because people have gotten burned by that in the past. You know, it's always been something that's very frustrating. It really just takes more money out of the consumer's pocket, which is something that I absolutely hate, especially in the world of physical media, mainly because, you know what? Some of these 4K Blu-rays, they cost a pretty penny, and we have to pick and choose which ones we want because for the most part, we don't really have that much of an expendable income. So that's my little rant on that. And without further ado, let's shift into the Q&A portion of this week's show and have some fun. And the first question is from Rico Gomez. Here's a question for you. When Terminator 4K gets announced, who will you buy from in order to get it right away? I got all 3 of my Karen 4Ks on one shot from Orbit within a week of release. So you got really lucky if you got them from Orbit then to get them within a week of release, because I bought them through Amazon and they all just came at different times. The date on Amazon was never correct when it said it was coming. I actually called them up, and you guys should do this as well. And if you complain to Amazon and be like, I pre-ordered these, none of them came on time, you don't really get much, but they did compensate me $10. And the $10 is better than nothing, because all 3 of those 4K Blu-rays were about $25. So you know what? I saved $10 instead of it being $75. I got them for $65. Man, they did inconvenience me because they did say it was going to be delivered on March 12th. And then their website was very inaccurate when it came to the actual release dates. But I know a lot of people got lucky pre-ordering them through Walmart. Some people got lucky pre-ordering them through Target. It really wasn't any specific site or store's fault when it came to this. It really was Disney and their supply. Disney just did not plan ahead enough, which I do not understand, because they announced these back in December when the digital scans were coming out. So they knew this was coming. They knew March 12th was coming. They shouldn't have been surprised at all. Everybody should have been at least getting their pre-orders fulfilled. Now, if you were walking into the store, I can understand them not having that, or if you order it after release. But if you had a pre-order put in and they guaranteed a release date, no matter what site it was, they should have at least honored that somewhat, at least compensated the consumer. Because when you pre-order something and they say it's going to be delivered on a certain date, unless they tell you like way in advance, which they did not, we were all just surprised when release date came around and we were like, wait, this got delayed? What the hell happened? And it's really just a supply chain issue. It has nothing to do with the actual sites and stores themselves. So, when I pre-order Terminator, I still probably will pre-order it through Amazon, although I do have to try Walmart. I've heard a lot of good things, while I've also heard a lot of bad things, so I got to give them a try myself before the Terminator gets announced. Obviously the best places to probably order it through, though, in my opinion, are sites like Orbit, Diabolic DVD, the Atomic Movie Store. In the UK, it's HD Movie Source. They're great. Any place that's like a small business, a mom and pop business, they're always going to give you more care than a place like Amazon. Amazon's a worldwide business. A 4K Blu-ray is the same to them as, I don't know, a shower handle, a towel. It doesn't matter what it is. They don't really look at the product. Whereas if you buy it from places like the Atomic Movie Store and Diabolic DVD, these people actually do care about films and physical media. So they're going to pack it in really nice packaging. They're going to put bubble wrap around it. They're going to put it in a box and make sure it's really nice and secure, where, no offense to Amazon. I buy from Amazon all the time. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. But the guy's going to walk up to your step. He's going to throw it right on your patio. The disc is going to pop out and you're going to hear it moving around. And that's in a thin envelope. Just a little bit of padding. So it's always worth it more to buy it from the smaller companies. The only thing is you might not get it on release date per se, but sometimes you'll get really lucky. If you order it directly through Scream Factory or Criterion, it's always actually going to be there earlier. I'm not going to say always. 9 out of 10 times I've gotten my Criterion released the Saturday before, and when it comes to Scream and Shout Factory, there's a good chance you get it 9 to 10 days before it actually comes out from anywhere else, and rewarding you for buying it directly through them. Although both Criterion and Scream and Shout Factory, they do charge a little bit more than what Amazon charges, but that's how Amazon is Amazon. They, always charge you a little bit less, but you should know what you're getting for a little bit less, and that's really a lot less TLC. And for me personally, I probably will still get it just because of the YouTube channel, and I want to try and get the 4K Blu-ray reviews out as soon as possible. So I'm going to go with whatever way is possible for me to get it early when it comes to something like that. But for the most part, if I can wait a little while, I'll pre-order it through the Atomic Movie Store or Diabolic DVD, especially the Atomic Movie Store, mainly because they have Shop Pay, which works really, really well for me. I know that Amazon has the same thing with Affirm, but my credit isn't the best, so I got denied when it comes to them. So I have to use Shop Pay, which doesn't run my credit. So the Atomic Movie Store, they have Shop Pay. Same thing with Vinegar Syndrome, actually. They have Shop Pay as well. And Vinegar Syndrome, it's always best to order through Vinegar Syndrome's website first. They definitely cater more to you, and you'll get it before everybody else if you order just to pre-order it through Amazon. And if you really absolutely love Vinegar Syndrome, their membership is probably worth it as well. But anyway, that was a great question, Rico. Thank you so much, buddy. And the first Kevin Kruger question this week is, how would you rank the following A24 movies? All right, so you guys see it on there. I made a list myself, and I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up like I like to do. And at the bottom of the list, I got the 2017 film, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. This was Yorgos Lanthimos' follow-up to The Lobster starring Colin Farrell, which I really liked a lot more, and it's probably still my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos film, especially his last two films, which have been a lot more critically acclaimed in The Favorite, and then obviously Emma Stone just won the Academy Award for Poor Things. Poor Things would probably be my second of his films, and honestly, my least favorite of his films was The Killing of a Sacred Deer. He has just so much ambition, but his films don't always stick the landing for me. Actually, his new film, it's an anthology film. It's going to be coming out in June. The first trailer for it just came out this past week. It's again going to star Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe, so I think they actually made this film right after they made Poor Things. That's why you see a lot of the same overlapping cast. You also get Jesse Plemons in there as well. Very curious to see what his new film is going to look like. At least all of his films are interesting, even if you don't love his films. Like, I didn't really enjoy The Favorite that much, especially not as much as everybody else, but Emma Stone is my favorite actress of all time, so no matter what film she's in, I am there day one to check it out. And that was the same thing with Poor Things. I didn't think Poor Things was the greatest film ever, but I also thought that Emma Stone earned that Academy Award. As much as I loved Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, you know, she had to portray a lot of emotion through her face, and I would have liked to see her get an Academy Award, mainly because Emma Stone's already won one, and Emma Stone's still very young, and I imagine she's going to win more Academy Awards. I think at the end of the day, Emma Stone could end up being one of the most acclaimed actresses of all time, and like I said, she's already my favorite actress of all time, so that's really saying something. But when it comes down to The Killing of the Sacred Deer, that film just wasn't my favorite, so that's why I have to put that one at the bottom, just to circle back to the question. And then after that, I got It Comes at Night. I remember being really excited about this movie, and it was very well made. It really was, but I just didn't love it as much as other A24 films. You know, that's really when A24 was just selling the films. That was enough for me to just be in the theaters, was for it just to be an A24 film, where nowadays it takes a little bit more than that, even though A24 is still one of the most consistent studios working today. For the most part, it's very rare that A24 misses, but there was a time when they never missed. And above that, I got Men, the Alex Garland 2022 film. Alex Garland's getting talked about a lot right now for his new film Civil War coming out in April, but just before this, he did Men, and I think Men is the one film he just missed on. A lot like Yorgos Lanthimos, he really is a very ambitious director. If you guys have seen Ex Machina, and then my favorite film from him is still Annihilation. I think Annihilation is honestly a sci-fi masterpiece. I don't know why a lot of people didn't appreciate that film when it came out. Maybe because a lot more people prefer Ex Machina, which is a great film as well, but I do think that Annihilation is still his masterpiece, although I think Civil War could be competing with that based on what the early reviews are saying about that film, so I cannot wait to see Civil War. But for me, Men was the one where I was like, it didn't entirely work, but it did have some incredible visuals, and it was extremely ambitious. That's one thing I could say about that movie. And next up, it might be a little bit surprising to you guys, but it's Uncut Gems. I really did enjoy that movie. You know, Adam Sandler doing drama again. He was perfect in the role. It takes place in New York City. The Safdie brothers, this will actually end up being the last movie the Safdie brothers made as a group, because they don't really work together anymore. I think they actually announced that they're not going to be making films together anymore. And Uncut Gems also featured a great Lakeith Stanfield performance, and the whole entire movie is just one long anxiety attack, man. It's going to sit with you, and it's just very hard to rewatch, and that's why I actually have it this low. Despite the fact that it's a very well-made movie with a great Adam Sandler performance, honestly, it's probably his best performance behind Punch Drunk Love, despite the fact he's mostly known for comedy. When he wants to act, and he can act his ass off, Adam Sandler, and he is just so good in Uncut Gems. And just above that, I got X. X is one of two films that Ty West released back in 2022. One you'll see a little bit higher on this list. Without X, the other film doesn't work, and X is a fantastic, straightforward slasher film that is just so well shot. Maya Goth plays two roles in this movie, and she's just fantastic. But overall, this movie, Jenna Ortega's in this movie as well. Overall, though, X is just a fantastic modern slasher in a world where we don't get too many of those. And then above that, we got Talk to Me. This was the best horror film of 2023. A couple of YouTubers decided to make one of the best horror films that I have just ever seen. I absolutely love Talk to Me. This one is only going to rise up this list as time goes on. One thing about A24 is they support young directors and let them see out their vision. And this was two directors just really knowing what they wanted to make and just making a very well-crafted horror film. Above that, you get a Robert Eggers film in The Witch. And this is really what put A24 on the map for me. This might be my first A24 film, and I thought this movie was a masterpiece at the time. This is also Anya Taylor-Joy's first film that she was ever in, and it is just dark, the entire time, but Robert Eggers' attention to detail when it comes to period pieces, making sure that the language is perfect, the way that they're speaking is of the time, and then of course, their religious views, making sure it's really of the time as well. I think it's just almost a perfect horror film, and honestly, this would have been his masterpiece if it wasn't for his follow-up, which is just above this, and that is The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, two lighthouse keepers in the early 20th century. This is a job that's not around anymore. I mean, there's probably a couple of them left, but at the time, this was a very important job, and these two men, they have to only deal with each other for a certain amount of time, and things just really start to uncrumble fast. And again, speaking of Robert Eggers and making sure that the language that these characters speak is of the time, it's very much of the time. The way he shot this with beautiful black and white in that letterbox to aspect ratio, I mean, it just looked phenomenal. It's got a 4K Blu-ray release, I believe, from Arrow Video, and in the United States, A24 actually released it themselves. But The Lighthouse, it's a movie I can always go back to. I absolutely love it. It has some dark comedy in there, really an almost perfect film. And then just above that, you want to talk about one actress really being able to elevate a film. The follow-up to X that Ty West made was a little film called Pearl, and Maya Goth gives one of the best performances I have ever seen. And of course, it's in a horror film, so it got completely overlooked by the Academy, but she gives a monologue in this performance that should have earned her an Academy Award nomination, and she would have been in the running for winning. But
Lord must have been generous to you. He never answers any of my prayers. I don't know why. What did I do?
Of course, like I said, it's a horror film, so it wasn't appreciated enough. Pearl's a prequel to X. They came out the same year. Just after they got done filming X, they filmed this beautiful character study of Pearl, and this is a very beautiful looking film as well. We're going to get the third film in the trilogy. I believe it's unfortunately going to be released in 2025. I don't think it's coming out this year, but either way, I absolutely cannot wait to see what Maya Goth does in Maxine. Her and Ty West just have a great working relationship, and Maya Goth, she's just becoming one of the greatest scream queens and one of the greatest actresses of all time. If she stays on this path, that's where we'll end up with her. And then at number one is one of the greatest horror films ever. I think it's one of the greatest films to come out in the last 10 years, and that is Hereditary. Speaking of an actress who got completely overlooked, Toni Collette's performance in this movie is just incredible. Not only should she have been nominated, she should have won the Academy Award for this film because she is just amazing in this movie. She gives a world-class performance, just dealing with grief and then everything else that has to unravel around her after that. It's unbelievable. Without spoiling this movie, if you haven't seen Hereditary, it is absolutely the best film that A24 has ever put out. It's the first film from Ari Aster. I didn't like Midsommar and Beau is Afraid as much as Hereditary. They're both very ambitious films. They're both still really, really, really good films. Ari Aster is one of our modern auteurs, so he has a certain distinct look and tone to his movies, but I think he just mastered it right out of the gate with his first film in Hereditary, and that is the best film from A24. So thank you so much, Kevin. That was a great question. I really do appreciate it, buddy. The next question is from 21OM6, and they ask, what's your top 10 most iconic favorite movie posters of all time? And I actually already did a list of the top 10 most iconic and my favorite movie posters of all time somewhere here on the channel. I think probably around a year ago now. So what I decided to do was basically do what would be numbers 11 through 20. So I'm going to do that right now. And we'll start from the bottom. So this would be number 20 technically. And that would be for Dawn of the Dead. This movie poster is so iconic that it's actually been, they've changed the colors on it a couple times on the 4K Blu-ray. It's basically the same poster, just in a different color design. But if you weren't sold on Dawn of the Dead, this movie poster would be just enough to push you over the top. But like I said, this is one of my favorite films of the 1970s, and it is an iconic movie poster. At number 19, I have Ghostbusters. Very simple. Just throw the logo on the movie poster. One thing I love about movie posters is when they create a logo for the film, like Jurassic Park or the Batman 1989 film logo. If the logo is so good, all you got to do is put that logo on the poster. And that's what they did for Ghostbusters. They created a company logo for the film, and that logo is good enough for the movie poster, and that's all you need. Just keep it real nice and simple, and Ghostbusters is one of the most iconic films of all time with one of the most iconic movie posters of all time. And then at number 18, despite me not really liking this film, the movie poster just stands out in the crowd, and that is for Star Trek, the motion picture, the rainbow-colored movie poster. The movie itself looks phenomenal. I just find it to be very, 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 very boring, very slowly paced. I think it's really there for fans of the show, and I've never watched the show, so I've only gone back and watched the movies, and I just did not really really enjoy the movie in particular, which is weird because Star Trek The Wrath of Khan is a great film, which we'll talk about one of these days, but the movie poster for the original Star Trek is an absolute classic. And then just above that, I got Scream. I actually have the Scream movie poster hanging in my living room right now. It is one of the most iconic movie posters of all time, and I'm not talking about the one that has the cast on it, including Drew Barrymore. It's the one with her hand over her mouth. It looks almost like Psycho. Love that movie poster. And then just above that, you gotta pick a Star Wars. I had A New Hope on my first top 10 list. Then you gotta go with the follow-up, The Empire Strikes Back. They changed the logo around a little bit. This one is even ripped off by Jay and Silent Bob and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. That's how iconic the movie poster is. And then just above that, I got Boys in the Hood. This movie poster has just always stuck out to me, and they always just keep putting it on the physical media releases. That's how good it is. It's very simple, but that's what you need. You don't need to do more than that. You know who the lead characters are in this movie, and obviously this is probably Cuba Gooding Jr. and Ice Cube's most iconic performances, and it's John Singleton's best movie that he ever directed as well. And then just above that, another movie poster that's just so iconic. You know, they printed all over everything. A lot of people have had this poster in their house. If you guys remember MTV Cribs back in the day, everybody had a Scarface movie poster on their wall, that black and white with the red font. Very simple again, but Scarface is one of the greatest gangster films of all time. Everybody knows who Tony Montana is. Al Pacino's probably second most iconic role, only behind Michael Corleone. I mean, in some people's eyes, Scarface might be even more iconic than The Godfather. Not to me personally, but in some people's eyes, Scarface might be more iconic, and it has one of the most iconic movie posters. And next up is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think all of the Indiana Jones movie posters are iconic, but this is the only one that was actually just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. The name wasn't changed yet. It wasn't Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was just Raiders of the Lost Ark at the time, and that's the movie poster that I think is still iconic. You know, they've kind of changed it now, but at the time, when it was just Raiders of the Lost Ark, that was an iconic movie poster. Above that, you got another classic of the 1980s, Back to the Future. They would kind of use a similar design for Back to the Future Part 2 and Back to the Future Part 3, but the original Back to the Future's movie poster is absolutely iconic, and it's beautiful. It really is. This is the same exact artwork again they've used on a lot of the physical media releases, including the 4K Blu-ray release, and it makes sense because you don't really need to change anything. It's that iconic. And then at number 11, Terminator 2's Judgment Day. Very simple movie poster here, just like the original Terminator. All you got to do is just put Arnold on the movie poster, put the logo on there, and that is it. Leave a plain black background. You don't need to do too much in here. There's nothing that's too busy going on. It's just Arnold. It says Schwarzenegger. It says Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's all you need to know. Terminator 2 Judgment Day, one of the greatest action films of all time, and it absolutely deserves to be on this list when it comes to its movie poster. So that was a great question as well. Thank you so much, buddy. I really do appreciate it. And the next one is from Uncle V, and he asks, can you toss out a list of movies that were so bad you walked out of or never finished? Well, I've actually never walked out of a movie. That's one thing I can honestly say. But there have been some movies that they pushed me and I think are just absolutely atrocious. Now, the thing is, when movies I think are bad, might not be something that other people think are necessarily bad. Now, right off the top of my head, Morbius is absolutely the worst. That is probably one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen. The cardinal sin of a film. You can be bad. Like, a lot of trauma movies are bad. I know you're a big trauma fan, Uncle V, but they're bad in a good way. You know, they use cheap effects, they have really crazy edits, bad acting, but that's almost intentional. It's really part of the trauma charm. So, you know, movies like Cobra, you know, Cobra's not a good movie, but I'm entertained by Cobra. Morbius, I'm not entertained at all. I'm bored to tears. And honestly, that's how I feel a lot about the Transformers movies, except for, you know, the animated Transformers film from 1986, the 2007 Originals Transformers movie, and Bumblebee. But the rest of them, Transformers Dark Side of the Moon, and I know people have told me that, like, that's one of their favorite action films of all time. I've told you guys here before, I do not like action movies just for action's sake. I actually find that stuff to be very, very, very boring, and every single MCU movie likes to end their third acts with just a big, gigantic action piece that I'm just sitting there and just pretty much bored the entire time, to be honest with you guys. That's why I actually think that Doctor Strange is one of the best MCU films, because they tried something different.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
You cannot do this forever.
Now, you can go too far and do exactly what the Eternals did and just bore me to absolute tears, and that's why the Eternals would make this list as well, because I do think that the Eternals, that and Thor 2 are the two worst MCU films, and they're honestly some of the worst films that I've ever seen, in my opinion, as well. You know, there's a lot of bad horror movies out there, but again, for the most part, when it comes to the horror genre, I at least feel like I'm getting something out of it. You know, there's some really, really, really awful ones. A lot of people didn't like the original Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, but look at what's going on now. The sequel? getting a lot of good reviews out there. I haven't checked it out for myself, but Kevin Kruger, he told me he thought the movie was a horror masterpiece. Rogue 1677, he gave the film 3 stars. So there's people out there, for the most part, getting good reviews, and that just means that's a good thing. That means they took what you said about the original one, which said it was one of the worst horror movies of all time. They took the criticism, and they said, okay, well, let's give it a try again. We get a little bit more money now. Let's see if we can figure this out. And apparently, I can't say for sure yet, honestly, from my own opinion, but from people's opinions that I trust, they've enjoyed it. So that's a good thing. That means they took the criticism and they made a good movie finally out of it, making good use of the Winnie the Pooh name. We really don't want to see them just dragging it through the mud, which is what, it's there right now. It's in the public domain. That's what you can do with public domain characters. Hey, we can get together, guys, and we can make a Winnie the Pooh movie if we want. I don't know if we'll make a good one, but we can give it a shot at least. So those are the movies that I really like. You notice that a lot of them are in the superhero genre, and that's just because there's been a lot of bad superhero films, Uncle V. You know what I'm talking about, buddy. But anyway, thank you so much for that question. I really do appreciate it, man. So the next question is from Lord Ray, and he said, I just did a major sound system upgrade on my main 85-inch TV. What sound system do you use? This is actually a good time. I get this asked to me a lot. What do I use? What do I use to review here on the channel? So to my left, you guys see my regular LG C1. This is actually my favorite TV because it's a little bit smaller and I can sit as close to it as I want. It's really good for watching movies and subtitles, but I don't have a good sound system hooked up to this, and also I have an Xbox Series X hooked up to it, so that means it doesn't have Dolby Vision. And honestly, the Xbox Series X in general, it's a good 4K Blu-ray player, but it does have a hard time with some of the bigger discs. So in my living room, that's where I usually watch my main movies. That's where I usually do the reviews first. I always like to do my reviews. I like to do a run through of the film, watch it, just watch the movie in general, take as many notes as I possibly can on the film and the 4K Blu-ray before I do any sort of test. I watch it on an LG C2 77-inch TV, and then I have a Sony X800 4K Blu-ray player. We have a review here on the channel for that 4K Blu-ray player and for a Panasonic 820 4K Blu-ray player. In my opinion, the Panasonic 820 is still the best 4K Blu-ray player out there, even though I have the X800. It really just comes down to you. I think the 4K playback on both 4K Blu-ray players is perfect. It really just comes down to your personal preferences. I've had no issues with my X800, so there's no reason to really upgrade. There's no reason to really change what I have. Now, my sound system, I've had my sound system for a few years now. I still only have a sound bar, but it's a good sound bar. I have at the time, is probably top dog. I have a Samsung Q90, and this thing, it came with 2 rear speakers, it comes with a subwoofer. It does put out Dolby Atmos, so it's got all the bells and whistles, and it's still fantastic. Like I said, this thing will shake my entire house. Given my house is only about 900 square feet, so not a very big house, it still will shake this entire house to the point where it feels like it's just gonna, disappear off the land like the house in Poltergeist. So it's still a very good soundbar, but obviously this does not compare to anyone who has a real legit sound system where they actually have all the speakers that they could set up in the room any which way they want. If you have like an 11 channel sound system, that's really the best of the best. One day when I get enough money, and we talk about me getting enough money, one day I will get a sound system like that, but unfortunately right now can't afford it, but I'm still so happy with my soundbar. I could definitely recommend it if you guys don't have it. Like I said, I still got the 2 rear speakers with it. You're still able to really test out the Atmos track. Like, my living room's not the biggest living room, so I know, really, I could feel the audio in there. I don't have the biggest room that I'm able to test it on, so if you guys are ever wondering what I test my 4K Blu-rays on, that's what I got. And then if I ever really want to test the 4K Blu-ray on, just a regular LED TV, really see how it looks like, because older LED TVs, they have blooming, and so I like to see how somebody with a TV like that, how they would actually see the film as well. And if somebody were to ask me, how it would look on a TV like that, I at least can give them that information. So that's the equipment that I have that I, do my 4K Blu-ray reviews on and watch all my movies on. But congratulations, Lord Raiden, on the new system. That is awesome, buddy. And the next question is from Fate's favorite name in the entire world, Mr. Smelly Potato. What movie were you most disappointed in walking out of the theater? Mine was X3 The Last Stand. Yeah, so I've had some movies that have really, broke my heart, but the one that really broke my heart the most was Dumb and Dumber 2. Dumb and Dumber, I think, is the greatest comedy of all time. And the worst thing that a sequel can do is make you think about the original and think, am I wrong about that? Or make you look at the original in a negative way. And I was walking out of Dumb and Dumber 2 thinking, am I wrong for liking Dumb and Dumber? Because they try and recontextualize certain elements of the original Dumb and Dumber in Dumb and Dumber 2, just really to make them look dumber than they actually were in the original one. They're idiots in the first one. They're dumb. But, they can get around. They're functional adults. In Dumb and Dumber 2, I'm like, these guys shouldn't be allowed outside. Like, they shouldn't be. Like, it just, when you try and recontextualize these characters, unfortunately, that's the worst type of sequel. And, sequels are the things that have obviously disappointed me the most. When you go into a film for the first time, it's a new property or it's just an original film, you're not as disappointed because your expectations are usually a little bit lower. But if it's a sequel to like one of your favorite films ever, that's always the films that let you down the most. I never get my expectations too high for a remake. That's why, like, I hate the RoboCop and Poltergeist remakes, but I didn't expect them to be great in going into them because I know that they're remakes of some of my favorite films. But like sequels to my favorite films, like I've been disappointed by the last 4 Terminator films. I do the thing where you're walking out like, oh no, it was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. I had fun. Like how people were walking out of the Phantom Menace back in 1999. Although the Phantom Menace really has come back around and people do love the Phantom Menace nowadays. But in 1999, people were telling themselves how much they did love it, despite actually not loving it. I've done that with plenty of movies. Batman vs. Superman, like, I hated that movie, but I remember still leaving the theater like, no, I liked it, because it's Batman. Like, I have to like Batman, right? Like, he's my favorite superhero, one of my favorite characters of all time. But no, I was very, very, very let down by Batman vs. Superman, so that's pretty high on the list as well, Mr. Smelly Potato. Man, I've honestly been disappointed by a lot of films. The Avengers, I was very disappointed by The Avengers. I've come around on that one as well, so... Iron Man 2, follow up to Iron Man. That one broke my heart. They made up for it with Iron Man 3. I know I'm one of like 12 people who likes Iron Man 3, but I don't care. Shane Black directed that one. It's a pretty damn good Iron Man film. But that was a great question. And Mr. Smelly Potato's other question was, rank these 80s movies. And just like the other ones, I made a list, and we'll start from the bottom, and we'll work our way up. So at number 10, I got Who's That Girl? It's only really low because I've only seen that movie once. Number 9 is Mannequin. Mannequin's probably most remembered for the song from Mannequin. We can build this bridge together. Standing strong forever. Nothing's gonna stop us now. And number 8, people are going to be a little shocked by where this is, and that's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Not one of my favorite John Hughes movies. I just have a hard time connecting to it. Although when I rewatched it last year for the 4K Blu-ray review, I definitely enjoyed it more than I ever have. Maybe that's because I was paying attention to it with a critical eye, but it's never been a movie that spoke to me. And Matthew Broderick, man, this guy plays supposedly the coolest character of all time. He never plays a cool character anymore. Number 7, The Breakfast Club, my father's favorite movie of all time. Not one of my favorite movies of all time, but man, it's still an absolute classic. Number 6, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, another high school film, and I think this one is one of the best out there. This one put Sean Penn on the map, Judge Reinhold. Nicolas Cage's first appearances in this movie, and it's just a lot of fun if you want to know what high school was like in the 1980s. I mean, I wasn't around, so I kind of follow movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Fast Times at Richmond High, but I think that Fast Times at Richmond High is better than that. And then at number 5, we get Footloose. I imagine high school was not like this for many people in the 1980s, but Footloose, we talked about the 4K Blu-ray. That 4K Blu-ray might have been a disappointment, but the movie itself is fantastic, entertaining as hell. Love the soundtrack. Love Kevin Bacon, Chris Penn. You can watch my full thoughts on this movie, but Footloose is just so much fun. It's ridiculous, but it's so much fun. At number 4, John Hughes' Weird Science. I just rewatched this last year for the 4K Blu-ray review. This one is a lot better than I remembered. I don't remember liking this movie as much as I did until I rewatched it. Bill Paxton's absolutely hysterical in it. Anthony Michael Hall, probably the movie I liked him in most. Definitely didn't like him in Halloween Kills, even though I liked that movie. Man, evil dies tonight with that guy, huh? At number 3, Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is just a classic of the 1980s. I probably only saw this movie before like 5 years ago, once or twice in my entire life. And I think I've seen it like 6 or 7 times in the last like 4 or 5 years. I just keep going back to it. It's just so entertaining. I don't know why it didn't stick with me as much when I was younger, but it really came back in full force lately. And now you'll notice my 2 favorite John Hughes movies are ranked at 2 and 1 here. And at number 2, I got Uncle Buck. This one stars John Candy. It's a vehicle for John Candy, and he is fantastic in it. You also get a young Macaulay Culkin in here. This is probably what got him the job for Home Alone. Actually, I'm sure this is what got him the job for Home Alone. I mean, John Hughes also wrote Home Alone, produced it, so even though Christopher Columbus directed it, John Hughes, that's really his movie in general as well, but he did direct Uncle Buck, and it is fantastic. And that means that number 1, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. John Candy and Steve Martin just have some of the best on-screen chemistry of all time. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of my favorite movies of the 1980s. That movie is actually like floating with my top 10 of all time. I watch it every single Thanksgiving. It's a tradition for me. And the movie itself is just an absolute masterpiece. Comedy gold in that movie. So those were great questions, Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you so much, buddy. 021OM6 actually asked me another question. I was going to answer it on this week's show with Faith. And since Faith, honestly, she called in sick to the show, we're going to do that question next week. It's talking about our favorite movie quotes of all time. And we had a good segment planned for it, but we're going to save that for next week. So I don't want you to think that we're skipping that question. You know, we have a couple other Kevin Kruger questions we're going to save for next week as well. But I think I got to most of them. We're going to end it with a couple short Kevin Kruger questions for this week. And the first one is, what is the first news story you remember as a kid? And it's actually the OJ trial. I can specifically remember my grandmother and my mother just reacting to that. You know, I was very young. I wasn't in school yet, so I was home during the day, and I could just remember them sitting in front of the TV. My mother and my grandmother, my mother is an Italian woman, my grandmother's an even older Italian woman, so they would just be sitting there in their bathrobes with cigarettes hanging out of their mouths while drinking their coffee and watching the OJ trial. So the OJ trial is the thing that sticks out most in my mind, the first major news story I remember from a kid. And the next Kevin Kruger question is also, would you rather have a perfect memory or be able to read people's minds? Luckily for me, I actually have a really good memory, but I would still prefer a perfect memory than being able to read people's minds. I do not want to know what other people are thinking. I think that's going to get really weird really fast. So I think I'll just rather have a perfect memory where I'm only living inside of my mind. I don't want to live inside anyone else's mind. It'll get weird really, really, really fast, and I don't think I want that in my life. I'll just keep the perfect memory. And the last Kevin Kruger question is, if you can go back in time and alter one historical event, what would it be? It's got to be like stopping Hitler, right? That's the worst of them. This guy was an absolute monster. The amount of Jewish people he killed alone started a world war. He's the worst person to walk this planet, right? I don't think there's ever been anyone worse than him. He's an absolute monster. So if we can go back in time, this is basically what the movie Looper is about. If you can go back in time and kill the worst person ever, would you do it? I guess I kind of have to. Like, I feel like I'm obligated to if I have these powers. Like, I can't let that amount of innocent people be killed because this guy is just an absolute maniac, right? It's got to be Hitler. So I think that's the historical event. If I can go back in time and alter, I think we're going to try and stop Hitler's birth, sit down with his mother. We'll try and do it simple first. We'll see if, like, you know, maybe you want to abort this kid. I promise you it's not a good thing that's going to happen with him. So that's probably what it'll be for me. So that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk Physical Media. I hope you guys enjoyed this show, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, share this video if you could, and if you want to become a channel member, you know, take your support of Let's Talk to the next level, maybe become a friend of the channel, become a channel producer like John Doe Juggalo, Jason Martin, or Mr. Smelly Potato. You could do that. Become a channel director like Frank's Media and Reviews. You can do that as well. Have your own choice review each and every month. Make sure you guys are following John Doe Juggalo and Frank's Media and Reviews on YouTube. They are great guys, and they definitely deserve your support. And if we didn't answer your question this week, I promise you we'll get to him next week. And if you have any more questions you want to ask us, make sure you leave those in the comment section below. Or you can always wait till Wednesday when I'll put out the questions post, and you can leave your questions there as well. And if you guys enjoyed this episode and you got no money to throw our way, don't worry about it. We do not mind at all. We just hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you guys get out in those streets and tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.